All right, welcome back. So part two, project budgeting. In part one, we set up a project creation. Here in part two, we're going to budget the project. First thing we're going to do is find the project that we set up in part one. We'll do that through the Project Command Center, which we can find under the Setup Projects menu. This brings up our Project Command Center. Right now we have the description selected, so we're going to search for the project. And it finds it. We see that here. So in part one, we did a few things. First, we set up the project, and that created this. This created the work breakdown structure using the template. We filled in the name and ID fields as well as the pertinent project information. We went to the Project Info tab, filled in this liability and information for insurance requirements. And then lastly we went to the Proposal tab, Business Development, and we changed the stages to the ones that we were working on, from not started to in progress. We changed the dates, filled in notes. Finally, we went down to the final disposition, marked it as 1, and then we changed the completion date to match when we won the project. And so that's everything we did in part one. We also want to look at this from a timesheet perspective now, though. So if we go to Manage, Time and Expense, and then open up a new timesheet for this week, if we were to try to add time to this project, so we've typed in our project in the project field, and then when we go to select the department, we would see that we only have the proposal department available. None of the other items from our work breakdown structure are visible. And that's an important distinction as to why that is. So minimizing this, let's go back to the Command Center for a second. So all we can see is this first line. None of these production phases are visible in our timesheets. And the reason for that is when we set up the template, we want to focus all of our time on the proposal effort. And then once we win the proposal, we as project managers have to go in and activate the production phases so the time can begin to be tracked against those. So here in the Command Center is where we're going to do that. So what we'll do is click this Manage tab, and then we're going to expand this up. So here in the Manage tab, we can see the status of all the phases, or all the departments. What we'll see is that all of these sub-production departments have a status of work hold. And that is exactly why we can't see them on the timesheets. When the status is work hold, they won't show up on the timesheets. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to activate all of the production phases. To do that, we'll click the top line here, the outdented CMT line. We'll click on the down arrow on the status, and we'll click Active. And then hitting Enter, because we've done it on the outdented CMT line, it replicates it down to all the subphases. We'll do that and click Save. And now let's go back to the timesheet and see what's on it now. So back to the timesheet. Now when we look at it, we can see all of our production phases. And notice we can't simply log time against the CMT phase. We have to pick a subphase that is the lowest level to track time against. So minimizing this again, let's go back here. Okay, so now that we've activated the project, we can begin to track time against these departments. And the next step we're going to want to do is budget the projects. To do that, first we'll want to delete the departments that we're not going to want to budget time against. Rather than try to budget out all the departments, first let's take care of the ones that aren't going to be relevant, and then let's budget the rest. If in your Project Command Center you don't have Show Resource Rows checked, let's go ahead and do that now. When you check it, along the inside of this line here, an R is going to show up, and these are our resource rows. Using these R fields, resource fields, we can add a new resource to the project. But first things first, let's go ahead and delete the ones we're not going to use. So for our test project, we're going to delete asphalt. It'll ask us if we're sure. Yes. We will leave concrete. Let's delete the aggregate department. Let's delete the subcontractor department. We'll delete engineering and environmental. And lastly, we will delete the drilling. Now it's important to note we're not deleting these departments entirely. We're simply removing them from this specific project. On the next project, we can come back and use them again. So now that we have it filtered down to the 5 departments that we're going to utilize on this project, we can begin to budget the resources. So first things first, let's start at the top. Boise Field. So if I want to add a resource to the Boise Field department, I can do so by clicking R and adding a labor resource. Now in your template, what you might see is slightly different from this, and we should follow the template. So if the Boise Field department has a labor resource on it already, then we can simply click on the labor resource here and add a new one right below it. We don't have to go to the phase line. You might also notice that some of your departments only have expenses on them, and in that case we should follow the status quo and only have expenses or equipment or subcontractors respectively on the departments that start with only those resources on them. For the purpose of our test project here, let's add a couple of labor resources here to the field. So we can see that this is a labor resource because it's indicated here in this description field. But the blank type field means that we haven't yet chosen the type of labor resource it's going to be. Now we could either type in the labor resource if we happen to know it, or we could pick from a list using the ellipsis. So let's pick a field professional. We can always scroll through the list, or if we're having a hard time, we can sort it alphabetically by clicking the description header. So now it's going to be in alphabetical order. Great. So we found the field professional. In the billing rate column, we notice that it's pulled in the standard billing rate for this field professional. So if we wanted to add budgeted hours for the field professional to the field department, all we would have to do is type in the number of hours we expect them to work here in the hours units column. By clicking enter, it'll multiply the number of hours times the billing rate to come up with a resource contract amount. And at the top line item, it'll sum up all of our resource contract amounts to come up with an estimated fee. But we've just done one line item. Let's continue to do more. So we have a second labor line below field professional. Now in this line, I expect this field professional to need overtime as well. And our overtime we budget as a separate activity. I'll show you why in a second here. Field professional overtime. So what you'll notice is all of the resource types, all of the employee types have a separate line item, have a separate description for an overtime activity. So when I select that, what we see is that they have a different billing rate than the regular time, which is one of the reasons why we have to make sure we budget them differently. Otherwise we'll end up running out of dollars before the project gets out.